It is the Heisman Trophy finalists. They were announced Monday night. And I'll just be blunt. I don't think I have ever really talked Heisman finalists on this show because in general, I just don't think it's a topic that's very interesting, right? We all watch college football. We all love college football. If you did not love college football, you would not be listening to this show. And so to me, by the time we get to this time of year, there's really a couple things about the Heisman that doesn't really warrant discussing who is going to New York for the ceremony. One, we generally know who's going to win that bad boy, right? Most years, it is pretty clear. It is pretty obvious by the final weekend. Joe Burrow, Johnny Manziel, last year with Bryce Young. It's just a formality once you get to a certain point. And in general, I'm not really going to get upset and worked up. Like when I get angry on this show, which I'm about to get angry in about 30 seconds, I can't generally get angry about the sixth guy being left home and should the sixth guy have been the fifth guy. And like, in general, that's just not who I am and not what I get fired up about. With that said, to go to this year, though, I thought the Heisman was going to be interesting this year because it appeared as though no one really ran away with it, but Caleb Williams was going to win the Heisman. I have no fundamental issue with that. But really, what was intriguing to me about the Heisman was I thought it was going to be cool because I thought it would be a nice celebration for guys who had really good seasons, but generally just came up a little bit short, right? I don't think Max Duggan is going to win it from TCU, but I thought he's going to be in New York, celebrate him, get ready for the college football playoff. But then beyond that, two guys who did so much for their teams, I thought New York would be a nice celebration for them. Blake Corum from Michigan, Hendon Hooker from Tennessee. And so I bring all this up. I bring it up as an introduction to say this. On Monday night, the Heisman Trophy finalists came out. Caleb Williams is going to be there. Okay, cool. He should be, and he's going to win it. Max Duggan's going to be there. Okay, cool. Excited to see him there. He deserves every accolade that he gets. Then it's Stetson Bennett. Okay, I guess that's okay. And then CJ Stroud is named the fourth finalist to go to New York. Those who will not be there, Hendon Hooker and Blake Corum. And so I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm not going to bury the lead. Let me get right to exactly where I want to be. Heisman Trophy winners, you should be embarrassed and you should be ashamed. And frankly, if you didn't have Hendon Hooker and Blake Corum in your top four, you should have your vote revoked. And I'm not Mr. Cancel Everybody guy and get all mad and get all worked up. But if you love college football and you follow college football and you watch as many games as you can over the course of a 13, 14-week season, there is no way you can watch those two players and say that they don't belong in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. Not saying they should win it over Caleb Williams, but there's no way they should not be there. And so let's get into it. Let's start with Hendon Hooker, because to me, Hendon Hooker is one of the best stories I can ever remember in college football. I think everybody knows it by now, but he was at Virginia Tech. He got beat out by a guy named Braxton Buxmeyer, Buxmeyer, I think is his name, who not only eventually lost the job, he transferred to San Diego State this year, okay? So Hendon Hooker loses the job. He comes to Tennessee. He doesn't even win the job at Tennessee. Instead, it goes to Joe Milton. Middle of the second game last year, he gets in. He never gives back that job. He was awesome last year. Tennessee exceeded all logical expectations in year one of the Josh Heupel era. And then in year two, it just blew up, okay? We all saw the games. We all watched, but Hendon Hooker was unbelievable this season when he was on the field. And so it would be one thing if he had a cool story, but this guy had the numbers to back things up. On the season, Hendon Hooker finished with a 70% completion percentage. Hendon Hooker finished with 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions thrown. Hendon Hooker deserves to be in New York. And here's the thing. It's not only that Hendon Hooker put up a lot of big stats, it's that he put up the stats in the games that mattered, that elevated Tennessee as an entire football program. Here's what Hendon Hooker did in the biggest games of the season for Tennessee. Against Alabama. Maybe you remember that game. First win Tennessee's had over Alabama in forever. Hendon Hooker finishes with 385 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. Against LSU, they get out to a big lead, so he doesn't have to be great and throw the ball a million times, but 239 yards, 2 touchdowns, Florida the week before, 22 of 28, 349 yards in a 5-point win. And oh, by the way, in an early game against Pitt that went to overtime, 325 yards and 2 touchdowns. And so to me, part of what makes the Tennessee, let me rephrase that. You can't tell the Tennessee story of this season of 10-2 on the brink of the playoff, the number 1 seed in the first college football playoff poll, without Hendon Hooker. Played his best in his biggest games, elevated an entire program. And so the idea that he is not being rewarded for that with a trip to New York is embarrassing and it's abominable. Okay, I just think it is so inexcusable. It is so unexplainable. This kid was not only such a good story, but he elevated his team in the biggest games. And I'll be honest, this is part of it too. People sit there and say, well, they lost to South Carolina. Well, they didn't lose to South Carolina because of Hendon Hooker. South Carolina scored 63 points on the Tennessee defense. Does Hendon Hooker play linebacker? Does he play safety? Does he play defensive end or defensive tackle? No, he doesn't. And as a matter of fact, I'll tell you something else. The Heisman Trophy voters have actually had a situation like this before. In other words, in 2018, that was the year Tua was running away with it, and Kyler Murray came back and won it in the final few weeks. And what the Heisman Trophy voters basically said was, we have to vote for this guy. We have to put him in because his team, he not only puts up great stats, his team needs every single one of those points. And without him, this would not be anything close to a playoff team. And so we're giving him the award. So if the argument is the defense gives up a lot and he lost a couple games he shouldn't have, well, the Heisman Trophy voters have already proven that they're willing to give it to a guy based on the stats he puts up because his defense is so bad. I'm not saying he should get it. I would vote for Caleb Williams. But I actually thought in some ways when Caleb Williams struggled against Utah, now we know he had a busted hamstring and a busted pinky. I thought when he struggled, I thought Hendon Hooker might come back to win it. He's not even going to New York. Beyond that, Blake Corum, Michigan. We all watched Michigan all year. We all know that for whatever reason, Jim Harbaugh did not want to unleash J.J. McCarthy. That's a big reason I was worried about Michigan against Ohio State. I said, wait a second now. No Blake Corum. I don't know if J.J. McCarthy can go out and beat Ohio State without Blake Corum. That's because Blake Corum was that good. 1,400 yards, top 10 in rushing nationally. And remember, he did not play his final 2 games of the season. 1,400 yards in just over 11 games? Are you kidding me? And then, oh, by the way, the game he gets hurt, he has 108 yards, 162 yards against Nebraska. How about this? A school record 243 yards against Iowa. And so why I bring this up is because, like Hendon Hooker had Tennessee on the brink of the college football playoff until he got hurt, until the defense let him down. Michigan probably is not in the college football playoff conversation without Blake Corum. And so to me, ultimately, that is why I'm frustrated. Because to me, the Heisman, okay, who wins it, who loses it, who whatever, who this, who that. Here's my thing, though. To me, the Heisman Trophy, I believe, what it should be the most outstanding player, okay? But the people that should be there, you should put the people there that you cannot tell the story of college football in that specific season without that person, okay? Now, Stetson Bennett is the quarterback of the number 1 team in the country, and this is no disrespect to Stetson Bennett. He's got a lot of help around him. He's got the Darnell Washington, the tight end. He's got the best offensive line maybe in college football outside of maybe Michigan. He's got weapons all over the field. He's got 3 or 4 great running backs. CJ Stroud, don't even get me started on him. I don't want to be mean to CJ Stroud. Biggest game of the year, was not good. 2 interceptions against Michigan. Doesn't win big games. Like CJ Stroud, the biggest games of his career. 0-2 against Michigan. Struggled against Penn State this year. So the point I'm trying to make, you cannot tell the story of this college football season without the name Hendon Hooker. You can't tell it without Blake Corum. Now, you can't tell it without Ohio State, but is CJ Stroud really the reason that Ohio State is there? I think it's a sum of the parts, right? So, again, I'm not trying to belabor the point. I wish we could invite all 6 guys. I just think it's an absolute embarrassment that Hendon Hooker is not in New York. And I'll be honest, I think it's an embarrassment that Blake Corum is not in New York as well. disappointed in the Heisman Trophy voters. I just don't think they did a very good job. And I think they let down two young men that absolutely deserve to be in New York. All right. Didn't think I'd get that fired up on the opening segment of the Aaron Torres pod, yet here we are. So I'm